Another December, another award show, hosted by the game industry's own Big G Keeley. Now before this show started, I was sure that I wasn't going to bother making a video about it because, honestly, I don't really care to make that kind of content anymore, but this event ended up surprising me, and thankfully, in a really positive way. I've given my opinions on 4 previous shows, and I don't always walk away all that pleased. In fact, I don't know if I've ever been all that blown away by a game award show ever, even dating back to when it was the Spike Video Game Awards. Last year's show was especially controversial thanks to how quickly award recipients were rushed off the stage. I think they were only given about 30 to 60 seconds to give their speeches, which means the interruption music would start to crescendo almost immediately after they started talking. It was pretty egregious and completely took away from the very idea that this ceremony was supposed to honor the industry. This was made even worse by the fact that celebrity guests who had no ties to the gaming industry at all seemingly did not have such a time limit, so some of them could spend their whole damn lives on stage if they wanted. To be completely frank, I felt like Jeff was totally unable to find a happy medium between a half-decent award ceremony and an event showcasing the next big games. It seemed clear that he only cared about the latter, and that's fine, because honestly, I only care about that too. I say it every year, I don't actually like or even respect award ceremonies run by committees or panels. Not for games, not for movies, not for music, anything. I think they're lame for a multitude of reasons. But if you insist on having one, at least run it in a manner that's respectful to the industry it's about. Don't rush people off the stage in less than a minute, especially since that's supposed to be their time to shine. After last year, I really believed a good show was beyond Jeff's reach. So going into this year's show, I had fairly low expectations. In fact, I was considering ignoring it until some strong rumors from multiple journalists and insiders started going around, suggesting that there were at least 1 or 2 big bombshell announcements that were going to be present. It's not like I have anything better to do, so I watched. And I expected 1, maybe 2 reveals to get a good reaction out of me. What I actually got was several. And not only that, but Jeff gave award winners more time to give their speeches, and celebrity guests were much less grating compared to last year. Still kinda grating, but not as bad. Now before I go into further detail, I do want to comment on expectations, because for some reason, some people still expected Grand Theft Auto 6 to show up here. Now I know it's been a year since the last trailer and you do want more, but GTA doesn't need any other event to show up at. When a GTA trailer drops, it is the event. And some people also expected Half-Life 3, which I can at least understand now since the rumor mill around Half-Life 3 suddenly picked up again. But still, that's almost as unlikely as a Bloodborne port or Silksong showing up. Those are all pipe dreams at this point. It's good to be optimistic, but you should be realistic too, okay? Anyway, let's go over multiple games that I want to touch on. I won't touch on every little thing that showed up because we would be here all damn day, so I'm only going to discuss the reveals that stood out to me the most. First, in the opening show, before the ceremony properly started, we got a look at Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, a return to 2D side-scrolling for the franchise, published by Dotemu and developed by The Game Kitchen, the studio behind Blasphemous. I've only played Blasphemous 1, but it was great, and 2 looks just as awesome, so I have no reason to believe that Ragebound won't be awesome too. It's really cool to see Ninja Gaiden back in 2 dimensions. After that is Rematch, a soccer game by Sifu developers Slowclap. Now this one surprised me because after creating Absolver and Sifu, I think everyone predicted they would follow up with another martial arts focused game. But no, we got sports instead. Now, I'm not against playing a sports game, but I'm curious about what will make this game stand out. The trailer on YouTube has a description that calls Rematch immersive third-person action with skill-based gameplay, which makes me wonder how the game will control. Are we looking at a soccer game that plays like a beat-em-up somehow? That sounds odd, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't interested. After that, we go into the main show, and this is of course where all the meat and potatoes are, and let me tell you, it was pretty front-loaded. By the time we reached the halfway point of the ceremony, I was almost exhausted by everything that was shown. Jeff really did surpass my expectations. The show kicked off immediately with The Witcher 4, and surprising no one, the main character is now Ciri, and while the trailer does give a taste of the story and tone, it doesn't show any gameplay, because it's strictly a CG movie. Now that is to be expected considering the game only entered full-time production very, very recently, so it's probably still 3 years away. After that, we got an appearance by From Software, who I was sure would only pop up if their project was Armored Core related or maybe even a new IP. But no, it was to show off more Elden Ring. And no, it's not another DLC, it is a standalone spin-off co-op game called Night Rain. And I saw some familiar figures in there, including but not limited to the Nameless King, a Firekeeper, and I think Duke's Dear Freya. Maybe I'm hallucinating, I don't know. According to IGN and other things I've read, it's faster paced than the normal game, and it's essentially set in an alternate lands between where the map is kinda jumbled and places are moved around. And apparently you have 3 in-game days to scrounge for resources and strengthen yourself as much as possible for a boss fight at the end. The only real negative to me that I've seen is that characters are pre-made and you cannot make your own, which makes me wonder how long-term progression is going to be like, assuming it has any to begin with. Basically, this is a squad-based survival game with some roguelike elements. Now I know some people are getting kind of pissy, acting like it's the end of the world and From Software are throwing out their integrity or some BS, but Elden Ring is so goddamn big, they made enough assets for it to make at least one spin-off, so just let them make it. It's obviously an experimental little side game, and even if it does suck, it clearly has no bearing on their actual big projects. In all likelihood, it's probably just meant to help hold everyone over until that next big project. So yeah, I am interested in Night Rain, and I think it could be fun. So I'm just going to wait and see. Next is a new project from Fumito Ueda, creator of Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. It was a brief trailer showing someone climb up the body and head of a giant mech or robot, enter its head, and then detach it and launch upwards to avoid an oncoming shockwave of some sort. It was a really moody trailer, but it was scant on details. The game doesn't even have a name yet. But regardless, if it's Ueda, I'm keeping my eyes peeled for it. After that is a brutal 1-2 punch from probably my #1 favorite studio on the planet right now, Ryuga Gotoku Studio. The first punch was in the form of a game that I knew was coming eventually but didn't expect so soon, and that's Virtua Fighter 6. Or whatever they're titling it, because technically it's not called 6 yet. It was brief and showed a very different looking Akira, who looked really snazzy and much older. There's a small indirect snippet of gameplay at the end where he's fighting a woman who looks like Sarah Bryant, but in the VF Direct after the Game Awards, she's called Stella. Interesting. Either way, I fucking love Virtua Fighter, even though I admittedly don't play it as often as I would like. And speaking of the Direct, it revealed the Ultimate Showdown 2.0 update, which is available now, and the Revo open beta for Steam, which is also open now, but only for 5 days. Back to the Game Awards though, after Virtua Fighter was another RGG project, and this time it was something totally new, Project Century, a game that takes place in the early 1900s, and the world seems so detailed that part of me suspects they are using a new engine. I knew they were working on multiple games because they always do, but I sure wasn't expecting this. And then we have the first really big bombshell from Capcom, Onimusha Way of the Sword. One of the rumors I saw prior to the show starting was that a long-dormant Japanese franchise would be coming back, and then this popped up. And then I was sure that person was referring to it because holy shit, I was not expecting Onimusha to make a comeback anytime soon. I guess the remaster of the first game that came out some time ago did well enough to convince Capcom to give it another shot, and I more than welcome it. I don't know how accurate the action in the trailer will be to the final game, but if the atmosphere is accurate, then I'm already sold. In fact, with Hideaki Itsuno gone, we don't know what will happen with Devil May Cry, so maybe this new Onimusha will take a step towards filling that role. Or maybe it'll stick to its roots and just be a survival horror with samurai. Doesn't matter to me because I'll gladly take either. At this point in the show, I was almost exhausted from how much shit I've seen. I was practically experiencing information overload. It was almost a blessing that the next big announcement for me was a good ways into the show. Specifically, one of the last big reveals at the end. And that is Okami 2, another dormant Capcom franchise that the previous rumor could have been referring to. But just as shocking was the fact that Hideki Kamiya is directing. After leaving Platinum, he just went back to Capcom, though not directly. He re-established Clover as an independent studio, it seems, which is great for Capcom, who can take advantage of his talents now, but it feels really foreboding for Platinum. I feel like Platinum cannot be in a particularly good place right now, but I hope I'm wrong. And those are all the games I plan on really prioritizing, but this doesn't mean I'm not keeping an eye on others. In addition to all the games I just touched on, I've got some interest in Slay the Spire 2, Solasta 2, Turok Origins, Warframe 1999, Screamer, Den of Wolves, Sonic Racing, Mafia: The Old Country, Dispatch, and even Crimson Desert now that it's a single-player game. I'm also keeping my eyes peeled for Outer Worlds 2, because I have kind of mixed feelings on the first game. I enjoyed it well enough while I was playing it, but once I finished and looked back on my experience, I realized that I barely remember anything. Outer Worlds 1 had the promise of a first game that would lead to a much better sequel, if that makes sense. But the sequel never came until now. Hopefully the second game actually manages to have those big concepts and big moments that truly make an RPG like that memorable. After all that, there are some games or franchises that I thought would be there, but surprisingly weren't. The biggest one was Resident Evil, which I was sure would be present to some degree, considering it's been almost 2 years since the release of 4 Remake, and we haven't gone this long without hearing of the series since the time between 6 and 7, I think. Over the years, I've seen some people claim that Capcom likes to make Resident Evil games in batches of multiple entries at a time, and I guess there's some truth to that. Now that the reveals are done though, I guess I might as well touch on the actual awards. Again, I don't particularly care for them, but I did watch the whole damn show, so I might as well give some thoughts. First, I'm actually completely fine with Astrobot winning Game of the Year. I would have also been fine with Metaphor, Rebirth, and Bolatra winning too, but Astrobot I will gladly accept. It is an extremely fun game, loaded with charm and interactivity. It's also not a huge commitment like Metaphor and Rebirth, and it does evoke a powerful sense of nostalgia that even Bolatro's sheer addictiveness can't really copy. I'm also very happy that Rebirth won Best Score and Music. If it deserved to win any of the categories it was nominated for, it's that one. As long as Rebirth got Best Music, then it could have lost any of its other nominations, and it did, but I don't mind, because it got the win that I feel it deserved the most. Best Art Direction going to Metaphor was so painfully obvious it might as well have been the only nominee. And I'll admit I did hope Luke Roberts would take home Best Performance, but I know Melina Juergens carried Hellblade 2 on her back, so I'm fine with her taking it as well. Also, speaking of Best Performance, if any cast member from Rebirth should have been nominated, it should have been John Eric Bentley for his performance as Barrett, because he absolutely crushed it. I mean, well, all the leads in that game crushed it, but John even more so. And then you have the Best Fighting Game category, which sucks every single year, but it's the only category this year that had a nominee that was just a straight up wrong answer, which is Multiverses. That game had no fucking business whatsoever being nominated. Its spot should have gone to Rivals of Aether 2, a much better platform fighter that did not disappear for a year and somehow came back worse. Anyway, that concludes all of my thoughts on the Game Awards 2024. It was a surprisingly good show that finally hit that sweet spot of having a ton of announcements without completely ruining the award ceremony aspect, even though I only really care about the former anyway. Jeff also finally took the opportunity to address all the layoffs within the industry. And Sven Vinke, the director of Baldur's Gate 3, would come out later in the show to echo the sentiment, which was really nice to see. This event was honestly comparable to some of the better E3 conferences, which makes me miss E3 all the more, because in its absence, I honestly feel like I've been proven right year after year that having one or two big shows in the year is much preferable to having like 20 scattered around the whole damn calendar. But I digress. This year's TGAs was very, very solid, and I can only hope Jeff pulls it off again next year. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.